So as you guys know, and as I've discussed on this channel many times before, I absolutely love side hustles. Like, I don't necessarily love that for a lot of us having just a full-time job is not enough to pay the bills. I don't love that part of it. But I do love the opportunity that side hustles can give us, not only as an additional revenue stream, but as a way to add some variation to your life, and also to find things that you're passionate about that maybe you didn't even know you were passionate about. Over the years, I have tried many side hustles, some of which I have talked about openly on this channel, and some of which I've never mentioned before. And so in this video, I'm going to be reviewing and rating every single side hustle I've ever tried. We're going to be talking about how easy it is to start each of these side hustles, how profitable they are, how scalable they are, as well as how much fun they are. This is probably going to be a pretty long video because I have tried a lot of side hustles in my life, but I've also gotten a lot of comments from you guys asking for ways to make money, so here you go. So if you're looking to diversify your income streams, this video is for you. If, like me, you really like having a little bit of variety in your work week, this video is for you. If you're just genuinely curious of all the weird things I have done to try to earn money over the years, this video is for you. Let's jump right into it. The very first side hustle that I ever got into, which was probably, oh gosh, definitely more than 10 years ago, was focus groups. Focus groups are an interesting one because I think that people tend to think that these are scams, but they're actually totally legit. There are market research companies across the world that will pay you very good money to give your opinion on products and services and different brands, and it can be a really easy and really fun way to make money. If you go onto Google right now and type in focus groups in whatever major city you're closest to, guaranteed you're gonna find a handful of market research companies who do just that. Sometimes these are one-on-one interviews, but the majority of the time, they're actually just group discussions, hence the name focus group. And they used to be in person, like you used to have to go and meet at a boardroom, but nowadays they're mostly done over Zoom, which makes it all that much more convenient. And I have done focus groups on all sorts of different topics. I remember I did one for Nestea, like iced tea company. I did one for banks, which was probably my favorite. You guys know how I feel about bank fees. So I did one where one of the major banks here in Canada wanted to put feelers out for how we feel about the different cost options for the accounts they offered. You can probably imagine how well that went. I did one for Costco one time for the photography services that they were selling, or the products rather. So I don't know if they even still do this, but apparently at one point you used to be able to go to Costco and get your photographs printed on like a mug or a blanket or a canvas or whatever. And so they showed us all these different products and they wanted to know our opinions on them and how much we'd be willing to pay for them and if we thought they were good quality, etc., etc. And really, I think it is some of the easiest money you can make. I think that on the low end, the least I've ever been paid for a focus group, it was probably like a 30-minute discussion or a 30-minute interview, and I probably got at least $75 for it. And on the higher end, I've done focus groups that are as long as like an hour and a half or 2 hours, and I think I've been paid as much as about $350 for that hour and a half. On a scale of easiness, I'm gonna give focus groups a 9 out of 10. Honestly, I think this is one of the easiest ways to make money. Like I said, you just sit there, you talk a little bit, you get paid, and then you leave. So I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. For profitability, I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. Like, it's very easy money all around. Sure, you might have to like commute somewhere if it's an in-person group and it's not super close to you. And of course, you know, you have to account for your time. But like I said, it's really good money for the amount of time that it usually takes, and I think it's really easy money. Scalability, on the other hand, I'm only going to give it a 2 out of 10. And that's because you really are very limited to how many groups you can attend within a given period of time. Most of these market research firms have rules like you can only attend one group every 90 days or every 6 months. With that said, you can sign up for multiple different research firms, so you can kind of bounce between them. At the peak, I would say that I was probably doing a focus group once every 6 weeks for the better part of a year or two, but it definitely can be a difficult thing to scale. And as for fun, I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10 because, like I said, I think it's pretty easy. I think it can be quite enjoyable, especially if you are a talkative person, as I tend to be. But overall, that leaves focus groups at a 6.5 out of 10. Not a bad way to make a little bit of extra pocket change. The second side hustle that I ever tried was something that I started doing in high school. And at the time, it wasn't even really a side hustle for me. It was kind of just like my part-time job that I had when I was a teenager, and it was teaching guitar. I figured out very early on that I could go get a job working at a coffee shop or a fast food restaurant or a grocery store, and I could be making, I think at the time minimum wage was like $9 and change, so I could basically work an entire shift after school, like a 4 to 9, and make like 50 bucks if I was lucky, probably less after taxes. Or I could go and leverage the skill that I had where I could charge a lot more money for my time and make the same amount of money in basically 1 hour of work. And for me, that was teaching guitar. I built up to having about 4 clients, I think, at my peak. They were all little kids, and I would walk to their houses after school and just teach them like whatever pop songs they wanted to learn or like really basic music theory. And honestly, it was great. I was charging $30 an hour, and to me, this was such a better gig than working at McDonald's. The thing I want to point out about this specifically is that I am not the most proficient guitar player in the world. I never have been, and I probably never will be. But in order to teach somebody something, especially when you're teaching complete beginners or young kids, you don't have to be a pro. You just have to be like a little bit better than they are. If you have 1 or 2 years of good practice under you, you can start teaching beginners. Like, not everybody needs to become the next Mozart. On the easy scale, I'm gonna give this a 4 out of 10, because obviously you do have to have some pre-existing skill and knowledge about something. In my case, obviously this was guitar, but it can be really anything that you're good at, anything that you enjoy. Any hobby you have, you can teach as private instruction, whether that's music, whether that's a sport, whether that's cooking classes, whatever it may be. On the profitability scale, I'm gonna give this a 7 out of 10 because, like I said, the money is actually quite good. I think private instruction is just a really good side hustle to be in. Whatever it is you're teaching somebody, if you were teaching them something one-on-one and you're going to their home to do that, you can charge a premium for that. You can actually do this over Zoom as well. For scalability, I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10 because even though for me it was just like an after-school part-time gig when I was a teenager, it totally can be scaled into a reputable full-time business, and I know a lot of people who have done just that. For fun, I'm gonna give it a 7.5. We're gonna go 7.5 because it really was, as far as jobs are concerned, as far as side hustles are concerned, it really wasn't that bad. It was pretty fun. Overall, that puts us at a 6.6 out of 10 for teaching guitar, or really any other teaching of any sort that you want to do. I think that this example in particular really highlights what I like most about side hustles, which is that whether your intention is just to make a few extra bucks every week or to eventually build this into your full-time business, you're generally going to be able to make a lot more money on a per hour basis than you would at most traditional jobs, and you're definitely going to have a lot more flexibility. Especially now that there are so many side hustles you can do online from home or really anywhere else in the world, the opportunity for freedom and flexibility has never been better. A really good example of that, and one of the coolest side hustle opportunities that I think exists today, is Printify, who was also kind enough to sponsor this video. Printify is an all-in-one print-on-demand platform where you can start your next business or side hustle for free. No, seriously, it's free to use. With Printify, you can create custom designed products like t-shirts, mugs, wall art, and over 950 other items, and then sell them on e-commerce platforms like Etsy, Shopify, TikTok Shop, eBay, and more, all from the comfort of your own home. All you have to do is select the products you want to sell, add your designs, and then start making money. Printify links directly to your seller accounts and handles order fulfillment for you by shipping your products directly to your customers. That means no pre-ordering or holding inventory, no packing orders, no trips to the post office, and best of all, no money out of pocket on your end. Don't have designs of your own? No problem. Printify has a library of graphics for you to pick from, as well as an AI generator to help you make custom designs at the click of a button. To get started on your new side hustle today, just click the link in the description box down below, and thanks to Printify for sponsoring this video. Okay, so the third side hustle that I used to do is something that is actually kind of similar to teaching guitar, but actually totally different, and that was teaching English. The way that I got into this was I was working a retail job at the time, and one of my coworkers was this really nice Chinese lady who came to me and said that one of her best friends had just moved to Canada and was trying to learn English and wanted a native speaker to sit with her and help her with her pronunciation and just have conversations with her and help her to learn the language. And she asked if I would be willing to do it. And I said, hey, sure, why not? So once a week, I would go with this lady to the public library, and we would literally just take like kids' books off the shelf, and I would help her to learn to read them aloud. I would help her with her pronunciations, and it was actually a very, very chill job. And after a couple weeks, she asked if I would be willing to work with one of her other friends, and before I knew it, I had 2 people that I was meeting with every week. I don't even remember what I was charging them. I want to say it was like $25 or $30 an hour. So it was, again, pretty good money, especially considering that I was making basically minimum wage at that point at my regular job. On the easy scale, I'm gonna give this an 8 out of 10. I mean, it really doesn't get a lot easier than just having basic conversations with people. Profitability, I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10 because, again, we're going back like 10 years now, and back then I was charging $25 or $30 an hour, which was really good money. Today, I imagine that you can charge even more. For scalability, I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10, which is a little bit lower than I rated the guitar teaching. And the reason for that, and I guess this is gonna depend on your community and where you live and whatnot, but I feel like there's actually a bigger market for kids wanting to learn guitar and parents who are willing to pay for that, versus new immigrants who are willing to pay somebody like me who's unqualified to teach them English. I just think it's a smaller market, so I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10 for scalability. And for fun, I'll also give it a 6 out of 10. I wouldn't say it's like the most fun job in the world, but it's also not difficult. It wasn't a big deal to do. And so overall, that gives us a 6.75 out of 10 for teaching English. And really, anybody can do this. The next side hustle is one that I have talked about extensively on this channel in the past, and that is flipping, also known as online arbitrage. So it's basically when you go on to Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, Kijiji, any of those types of apps, you buy something and then you resell it on those same apps at a profit. And I have done this for going on, oh my gosh, 7 or 8 years now, pretty consistently. I'll admit that in the last year or two, I have fallen off a little bit just because I've been so busy with other things like this channel and my other job and just trying to live my life. But it is something that I still do to some extent today because I genuinely enjoy it. I have flipped predominantly musical instruments, things like guitars and drum sets have been my biggest sellers, but I've also done other things as well. I have bought and sold a few MacBooks, some iPhones, some camera gear. I don't think I've talked about this, but something that I used to buy and sell a lot of, which I don't deal with anymore, was Little Tikes bouncy castles. And that's really weird and niche and specific, but Little Tikes, the kids company, sells these like inflatable bouncing castles that you can set up in your backyard for like a barbecue or a kid's birthday party or whatever. And I figured out at one point that they were retailing for like $300 to $400, but that a lot of people were selling them online for around $100 because either their kids had outgrown it or they bought it for like a one-time use for a party and never used it again. So I'd scoop it up for like $100. I would take it home, I would set it up on the front lawn, I would take some pictures, and I would resell it for like $200 and make a quick $100 profit. So that's a kind of weird one. The other cool part about this is that if you are flipping things within a niche of products that you like, that is like a hobby of yours, you also get to like tinker with stuff and play around with stuff at no cost to you. So I could go out and buy a guitar and I could play with it for a week or two and just have fun with it. And then when I decided that I didn't want it anymore, I could just resell it at that point. I will say you have to have the self-control to not just accumulate stuff and become a hoarder. You have to be able to know like, okay, fine, I actually am gonna sell this. But yeah, there's a buyer for everything. And if you can buy something under market value, you have now created a pocket where you can make money. I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 10 for easiness because technically anybody can do this and it certainly doesn't require you to be a rocket scientist, but it does take a little bit of work. You have to become knowledgeable about a product, you have to put in the time to find it, and the bigger thing is you have to actually go and get it. And yes, you do have to meet up with strangers in the parking lots of gas stations and coffee shops. But honestly, I've done it like hundreds and hundreds of times and I've never had a terrible experience. I've had some weird people, but I've never actually been in danger. On a profitability scale, I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10 because really you can make a lot of money doing this. The amount you make is directly tied to how much time and effort you input. So the more time you spend sourcing out products and researching things and learning about things and negotiating deals, the more money you can make. For scalability, I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10. Like I mentioned, you definitely can make a lot of money if you're willing to put in the time and the effort to do so, but you are somewhat limited to the number of opportunities that are in your area. So if you're in a big major city, you're gonna have a lot easier time finding things to buy than if you're in a small town where Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace might be mostly a ghost town. For fun, I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. This is obviously very subjective, but personally, I've always found this to be really fun. I really like finding a good deal and you get like a huge thrill of the hunt, thrill of the bargain, and then especially when you sell something, and there have been times where I've been able to sell something for several $100s of profit within just hours of picking it up, and to me there's like a big adrenaline rush there. So again, it's all a matter of opinion, but overall I think that it's pretty fun and I enjoy it. And for flipping as a whole, that brings us to an average of 7.4 out of 10. I recommend you try it. I think everybody should try it. At the very least, you'll make 50 bucks and you'll get out of the house. Go for it. Another kind of flipping that I tried, I was much less successful at, but that is furniture flipping. Now the difference with furniture flipping as opposed to flipping guitars and iPhones and whatnot is the goal was not just to go and buy something and then immediately resell it, but to bring it home and refurbish it and refinish it and paint it, yada, yada, yada. There's a lot of people who do just that here on YouTube, and I thought it looked like fun. So one day during the pandemic, when I had nothing better to do with my time, I went, picked up a dresser and brought it home and tried to paint it, and it was a complete mess. It was a disaster. I didn't have the right kind of paint. It almost killed me lifting this thing in and out of my car. I had nowhere to put it. It was just a mess. When all was said and done, I did sell the dresser, but I sold it at a loss after accounting for my paint and all that crap. That was a one and done for me. I tried, I failed, and I moved on. With that said, if you prepare better than I did, if you do some more research, if you get the right tools and the right products, if you have bigger muscles than I have to be able to move heavy furniture pieces, you might be more successful, but I do think it's a lot of work. As far as easiness goes, I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 10. Once again, I don't think this is rocket science, but you do have to have some skills. You have to be a little bit artistic. You have to know how to use some power tools. That definitely helps. It's doable, but it's not necessarily easy. Profitability, I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10. Again, my experience wasn't good, and that's also because I went out and bought all of these products. I bought paint and cleaners and rollers and all this stuff, and only wound up using it for one dresser, which meant that my cost per use was very, very high. But if this is something that you actually stick to, then your startup costs are averaged out and they're not bad, and you definitely can make good money reselling furniture. Like, I've seen plenty of people pick up free dressers off the side of the road and then refinish them and sell them for $500. So the money potential is there, it just wasn't necessarily for me. Scalability, I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 10. This is a little bit more of a difficult one. Like, there are definitely people who can scale this into being a full-time business for themselves because the profitability is there, like I was saying, but it's also not something that you can necessarily like outsource to other people and build into like a big business, because it is very labor intensive. And so the amount that you can do is directly tied to the number of hours you can put into it. And for fun, I'm gonna give it a 5.5 out of 10. Again, this point with the fun thing is always gonna be very subjective. Painting is fun. Like, it's like arts and crafts. It's fun, it's relaxing, that's all good. But I did find it to be generally pretty stressful when I would try to do something and it wouldn't work, and then I wasted all this time and all of this paint and all these materials. So again, I think if you know what you're doing and if you're an artsy person, maybe it's really enjoyable for you. If, like me, you're kind of short on patience, it could be a little bit monotonous and not necessarily the best experience. Overall, I give furniture flipping a 5.1 out of 10. The next side hustle we're going to talk about is credit card churning. If you don't know what that is, it's basically where you go and open up a credit card specifically for the intention of taking advantage of the welcome rewards, and then basically shutting down the credit card and doing it again and again and again. You can do this with bank accounts too, by the way. A few years ago, there was a promotion here in Canada with all of the major banks where if you opened up a specific Visa card with them, they would waive the additional fee for the first year, and then you get 10% cash back on all of your purchases up to the first $2,000. So basically spend $2,000, get $200 back. So in the span of 2 or 3 months, I probably opened up like 5 Visa cards where I would basically open the card, put $2,000 of my everyday normal expenses on it, gas, groceries, vet bills, all that good stuff, get $200, and then call and cancel the card or downgrade it to a free one that will never charge me an annual fee, and then go to the next bank and do it again and again and again. And over the span of this like 2 or 3 months, I basically made $1,000 in cash back just by paying for the things I had to pay for anyways. So free money. This is something that I still do sometimes. I definitely don't put like a ton of time and effort into it. I know there are people who do. I'm not one of them. The one thing I will say about this is that you can only do it if you really are a credit card person. If you know you're the kind of person who can manage a credit card, who can control their spending, who will pay off the balance in full, then it's basically free money. But if you're the kind of person who gets a credit card and then just goes crazy and buys a bunch of stuff you don't need, you're not gonna be doing yourself any favors. So don't do this unless you know you can handle your credit, but I can, and I did. On the easy scale, I'm gonna give it like a 3 out of 10, which is kind of low, but the reason for that is it does take quite a bit of time to like research different credit card options and to figure out all the intricacies of the deals to make sure you can take advantage of them without getting ripped off. As I said, you also have to be able to manage your spending in the first place, and you should know that doing this will drop your credit score. So if your credit score is already really high, when I started doing this, my credit score was probably about 815. And after opening up these 5 cards, it dropped down to like maybe 750, which is a pretty significant drop. But because it was already so high, there isn't really, like, it doesn't matter, it's not a big deal. If your credit score is only like 700 and it drops down to 650, that's not a good idea. Don't do that. So 3 out of 10 as far as easiness is concerned. Profitability, I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10. 6? 5? We're gonna go 6. We're gonna go 6 because, like I said, in the span of like 2 months, 3 months, however long it was, I was able to make $1,000 for doing not really anything special, just paying for my normal stuff. There are people who are able to get free flights doing this kind of thing. Like, there are a lot of opportunities out there to make a lot of money in a short period of time. But for scalability, I'm only gonna give it a 5 out of 10. There are entire Reddits and forums dedicated to people who spend enormous amounts of time doing this, and they're able to get some really impressive results and get some really, really cool perks and cash back and all sorts of stuff. But again, this isn't something you could necessarily build into like a full-time business. And for fun, I'm gonna give this a 5.5 out of 10. It's It's not actually a fun thing to do. You're just applying for credit cards and then just paying for groceries, but it is fun to see that you're getting all this cash back for doing nothing really. Overall, I give credit card churning a 5.1 out of 10. If you're a credit card person, give it a try. If you're not, then do not do this. Don't do it. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not giving you financial advice, but my financial advice, if I was going to give you some, is don't pay for things on credit cards just to get cash back if you're not going to buy those things anyways. That's dumb. All right, we got 2 more to go. The next one is plant propagation. This is a super random one. We're going to fly through this pretty quick. This is something that I kind of stumbled upon by accident. In the corner behind me over there, I have a big Monstera plant. I bought that plant years ago for $35. And I figured out pretty quickly that people were selling cuttings of big plants like that on Facebook Marketplace for $10, $20, depending on what kind of plant it was. And I was like, I have an idea. So basically all I do is I take a clean pair of scissors and I snip off a branch of that plant or whatever other plants I have. I let them sit in water, I let them root, and then I sell those clippings to people, typically for $10 to $15 per clipping. As far as easiness goes, this is pretty much as easy as it gets. I'm giving this a 9 out of 10 because I literally don't have to do anything. It takes no time, it takes no effort. I just let the clippings sit in a jar of water for a couple weeks and boom, profit. As far as profitability goes, I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 10 because the amounts of money that I am making doing this are very small. It's like I said, $10, maybe $20 at a time, but it is profit that you are extracting out of basically thin air. Like it's just like a plant that continues to repopulate itself and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then I cut it and sell it, and then it gets bigger and then I cut it and sell it. So you can't really complain about that, can you? Scalability, I'm gonna give this a 7 out of 10, which might sound weird. I certainly have not attempted to scale this to any sort of degree, but if you look online, there are a lot of people who have. There are people who have amassed big collections of all sorts of tropical plants, rare plants, all sorts of succulents, things like that, and they trim them and they propagate them and they sell them, and I think there are people who are doing this on, if not a full-time basis, close to it. So I think the scalability is there, it's just not something that I've personally explored. And for fun, I'll give it a 5 out of 10 because there's certainly nothing unpleasant about it. There's certainly nothing stressful or difficult about it, but it's also just not something that's like super fun or fulfilling or engaging in any way. So 5 out of 10, average. Overall, that makes plant propagation a 6.5 out of 10. And finally, that brings us to the last side hustle, which is probably the one that people seem to be the most interested in, understandably, and that is this, YouTube. YouTube is an interesting thing because it morphs and changes the deeper you get into it. When I started this YouTube channel, it was a hobby. Whether or not I wanted it to be a business was irrelevant because it was just a hobby. I was pouring hours and hours of work into it and dollars into it for gear, and it made no money at all. After a while, it started to pick up traction, my channel started to grow, I was able to monetize, and it became what I would call a side hustle. It allowed me to bring in a couple $100s a month of extra money, and then in more recent times, it has grown to a point where I would now consider this to be not just a side hustle, but a part-time business, maybe even verging on becoming a full-time business at some point soon. The thing that I think is really cool about YouTube is that it allows you an opportunity to monetize any type of hobby or interest or career prospect you have. Like, people might assume on the surface that the hobby is the content creation or the filmmaking itself, and for some people it absolutely is, but not for everybody. Like, if you, for example, wanted to be a musician growing up, you could become a musician in the traditional sense where you're like on the road and touring and selling CDs, and that's a very hard thing to access. But YouTube has removed the barrier to entry where now anybody can just sit in front of a camera and play their music and show it to the world and generate hundreds of thousands of fans and make money doing that. In the same line of thought, all these kids who grew up wanting to play like video games professionally, probably a really far-fetched career prospect, but they've been able to come over to YouTube and make gaming channels and make money that way. If you dreamed of being on the Food Network when you were a kid, now you don't need to be on the Food Network because the Food Network is right here and it's you and it's on YouTube. So I think that that's the really, really cool part. As far as how easy it is to run a YouTube channel, this is a really hard thing to gauge because there is so much variation as to how somebody goes about being a YouTuber. There are people who record everything on their phone, who hold their phone out like this and talk to it, and boom, they made a video and they upload it with no editing and it works for them. On the other hand, there are people who have, years of experience, who have gone to film school, who are professional filmmakers and photographers, who have thousands of dollars worth of equipment and who spend hours and hours and hours and have a whole team. And so it can be very difficult or it can be very simple, but either way, building it up to something that is profitable is a lot of work and does take a lot of time. But really, anybody can do it and you aren't really held back by your experience or your skills or your gear. And so I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10. Like, It's not the hardest thing in the world, but it's also not the easiest. For profitability, I'm gonna give it a 6.5 out of 10 because the potential to make profit is absolutely there, and people who are at kind of the top tier of being YouTubers make an astronomical amount of money. But again, it takes a lot of time and dedication and commitment to get there. But if you stick with it, the profitability potential is absolutely there. So 6.5 out of 10. And with that in mind, I'm gonna give it a 10 out of 10 for scalability. I think that's the first 10 of the video, isn't it? The thing is that unlike most other jobs, the special thing about YouTube is that as your channel does grow, as your audience gets bigger, as you get more views, the amount of work you have to put in doesn't necessarily change. Like for example, and these aren't real numbers, I'm just pulling this out of thin air, but let's say this video today gets 10,000 views and I make $100 out of it. But let's say in a year's time, my channel has grown tenfold and I get 100,000 views and make $1,000. Like the amount of effort I'm putting in on my end hasn't changed. My videos haven't necessarily changed, but as my audience has grown, the amount of money I can make has grown as well. And for fun, I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. There are some parts of having a YouTube channel that are a ton of fun. You get to virtually meet thousands and thousands of people who are interested in the same things that you're interested in. You get to work with all these really cool brands and try out all these really cool products. Like I said before, you get to make videos about whatever it is that you find interesting and exciting, and so that's undeniably fun, and that gives YouTube overall a 7.4 out of 10, which interestingly I think is the same score that I gave flipping, which is interesting also because even though they're completely different, I think I enjoyed them equally. So I think that that's actually like a pretty good comparison. But those are the 8 side hustles that I have tried, some of which I've succeeded at very well and some of which I have failed at miserably. And hey, it is what it is, that's part of life. I think that trying different things, finding different things that you like, things that you don't like, finding ways to make money that are maybe better or easier than the things you've done in the past, I think that's what makes having a side hustle so much fun. And I can honestly say that regardless of what circumstances I find myself in from a financial perspective at whatever point in my life, I'll probably always have some sort of side hustle on the go, just because I find that it's fun and it's interesting and it keeps life exciting. So that's just me.
You know, I've had a lot of jobs. Boxer, mascot, astronaut, imitation crusty, baby proofer, trucker, hippie, plow driver.
I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on these 8 side hustles. If you have tried any of these yourself, let me know in the comments what your experiences were. And if you have a side hustle other than the 8 that I've mentioned, I'm very curious to hear what it is. So also let me know in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this video at all, please go ahead and hit that like button. Feel free to subscribe if you haven't done so yet. You can follow me on Instagram at according_to_Nicole. Other than that, thank you guys so much as always for watching. Take care. I'll see you next week.
Food critic, conceptual artist, grease salesman, carny, mayor, grifter, bodyguard for the mayor, country western manager, garbage commissioner, mountain climber, farmer, inventor, smithers, poochie, celebrity assistant, power plant worker, fortune cookie writer, beer baron, quickie mart clerk, homophobe, and missionary. But protecting Springfield, that gives me the best feeling of all.